Well, hi guys. Coach Jerry here at the Protocol Strength Conditioning in Tucson, Arizona. And as you may have noticed, today we are not at the gym. We're actually in my garage. And the purpose of today's video is I wanted to show you guys how to build a weightlifting platform. Now, we've had one of our upgrades that we decided to do this year at the gym was to put actual platforms underneath our 3 squat racks. There's a variety of reasons that I wanted to do this, which I'll explain a little bit later in the video, but the main purpose today is to show you, number one, how to build them, what materials you're going to need, and also some ways to give your platform a more professional look. Now, this will work if you're building something for your gym, or if you're just a garage athlete enthusiast and you want to build yourself a platform in your garage. Now, there's a couple touches that I'm going to do a little bit differently than what you'll see in most of the YouTube videos on doing a homemade platform. The main reason for some of these differences is I wanted to give the platform a more finished high-end look because, again, it's not going in the garage, it's actually going into our gym and we want it to look nice. So with that intro out of the way, let's go ahead and get started. We'll go ahead and talk about a little bit about what materials I'm using, why I chose those materials, and then we'll get into some of the building, construction, and finish so you can have a very professional looking platform without a professional price. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with some of the things that you'll need here. I have chosen to use a table saw. Now, can you do this with a circular saw? Yes, you can. Your cuts will not be as clean, so I highly recommend using a table saw. If you don't have one, you can actually rent one just for this project. Now, I want to bring your guys' attention here to these guys as well. So what I have here is 2 different types of plywood. 3 different types, actually, if you count the size. These ones that you see on top here are just traditional OSB plywood that you would use for like roofing, subfloor, things like that. It's a 3/4 inch material. And then you'll see back here, I also have some 1/2 inch material. Now, this piece that's sitting in between, you guys will get a better look at that here in just a moment. This is a 4x8, 3/4 inch piece of oak. So this is just all this stuff can be sourced from your local supply place. These came from Home Depot, actually. The other thing that I have over here is 3/4 inch thick 4x6 stall mats. Now, I got these from Tractor Supply. I got very lucky. They were actually on sale. They were $39.99. I think they're normally like 55 bucks. So got lucky there. We're going to be using those for the sides of our platform. And before I go to my next screenshot here, I also want to go back here to the plywood and explain why I have the 1/2 inch. I have the 1/2 inch ply as well as the 3/4 inch. The reason for that is because of this thing right here, which is the Titan 8x8 metal platform. So we bought 3 of these. We have 2 here in the garage. The other one's already at the gym. And this metal platform is the frame that goes around the outside. So number one, it hides a lot of the dirty work, but also it gives you a really nice finished look. So it looks like a professional setup, which is what we need for our place. These metal brackets that you guys are going to see a little bit later in the video are 2 inches tall. And we decided that we didn't like the idea of having there be like a dip in the frame where people could trip on. So we decided that's the reason for the extra 1/2 inch of the OSB. When we're finished with this whole thing and we put the whole thing together, it's going to be about the same height as the edge of the frame. So in other words, it's flush. So there's no risk when you're getting off the platform of tripping over it. Now, there's obviously a risk of tripping over it when you walk up to it, and you'll see later in the video what we did to help with that at the gym as well. So these are the basic parts and pieces. Now we're going to talk about measurements. So this is our frame. So this is the 8x8 lifting platform from Titan. I'll actually put a link to this down in the description. The reason I chose this one was really it was the only one that I could find that was this size. Titan makes really, really good quality stuff. I am not an affiliate of theirs, so I am not getting any product placement stuff for this, but I just picked it because the price was right. I think at the time this was on sale. These were, I think, 270 bucks a piece, which pretty good deal, especially considering like getting the thing with all the other stuff was way more expensive. So we're going to be making all of the insides. What I really liked about this, and I'll try to see if I can get this in the screenshot. These corner pieces have a little bit of a wider opening for where you put the bolts in to bolt them down. So this little extra 1/8 of an inch in each direction or so play is really, really helpful for what we're gonna do, which is to build a custom platform. So in other words, if I build it an eighth of an inch off or whatever, it's not a big deal. I'll just slide the corner pieces in so it butts right up against it. Basically, as long as our unit is square, we're gonna be fine. And all the hardware and all the quarter units are all a part of this setup. Now, I'm gonna move my camera here. This is what I meant about the 2 inches of height. So this is the reason that I got the extra piece of the 1/2 inch OSB. I don't want there to be a lip right in here. So I want my platform to sit flush to that. So that's what I meant earlier when I said that. So this is, I have this set up. Notice I don't have any of the hardware in it just yet. I basically just have this here to work as a test fit. As I'm cutting my pieces, I want to make sure everything fits real nice before we finalize everything. So this is the platform. Now, before we move on to our wood pieces, I want to point out something really important. This is part of the reason for our table saw. I have my tape measure stretched across this frame, and I want to zoom in here so you guys can see. It is not actually 8 feet. It is about 94.5 inches. Now, it's actually a little bit more. It's probably a little bit closer to 94 3/4. Now, the difference between that 94.5 and a 94 3/4 is important. My subfloor, in other words, the plywood sheets that are going to be sitting underneath the platform, I'm going to cut those to 94.5. The top piece is going to be the full 94 3/4. Why is that? Well, I don't want my bottom piece to be visible through the gaps. When you see the finished product, you'll see right in here, there's going to be a gap. And I want to make sure that when I butt my metal pieces up and I tighten up all the screws, that there is not going to be any visible gapping down at the bottom. I want everything to look flush and tight like we bought it this way from the factory. So this falls into the theory of measure twice and cut once. It is 94.5 inches actually in both directions, so it is a perfect square. And that's going to become important when we get to our next part here. So now we're getting ready to make our first cut. What you'll notice here, even though technically I need 1.5 inches taken off to give me my 94.5 inches, I've actually made some adjustments here. The first adjustment I made was by 1/8 of an inch, which factors in the width of the blade of the saw. The other adjustment, you'll notice it's actually not right at 1/8 of an inch. It's actually got an additional 1/16 of an inch. The reason for that is because a 4x8 sheet of OSB is not actually 4x8. It's about 1/16 of an inch shy. So because I want my piece to be as close to 94.5 as possible, I've made that adjustment here in my fence. Now, do you need to be this particular? No. Remember, on our frame, we have that little bit of margin of error that sits in those corners. I just want to make absolutely certain that my pieces that are underneath my main, the main top of the platform that everybody sees, just sit just a teeny tiny bit shorter than the others so we don't have that gap. So that is our setup here. that we've made all of our cuts, we're gonna do a dry run of the assembly so you can see what everything looks like before we get to the finishing process. So what we have here is layer number 1. We are looking at the squat rack dead on, like we're getting ready to walk up to it. My first 2 sheets of OSB are the 1/2-inch sheets. This is gonna act as our base layer. We've cut all of the pieces, as you saw from the early videos, to where putting these 2 together gives me 94.5 inches by 94.5 inches. This is layer number 1 using the 1/2-inch OSB. Next, we're gonna place the 3/4 inch OSB on top of this, except those are going to be facing the other direction. So these are up and down, and the next ones are gonna be left and right. But again, because of how we made the cuts, it's gonna be still a perfect square of 94.5 inches by 94.5 inches. You will see that here on the next screen. Oh, hey, one more thing. This sheet, so OSB always has a pretty side and an ugly side. So what we decided to do on this one is the pretty side is actually down. So the side that you guys are looking at here is the ugly side that is facing up. The pretty side is perfectly flat, and we figured that would make a better base layer for when we bring it into the gym, so everything will sit down there real nice. Now, when I put this next set of 3/4 inch on top, the pretty side is gonna go the other way, so then when we put our final layer on there, it's going to, again, be really flat. Now, if there's a little bit of bowing, doesn't matter, we're gonna put screws in, you'll see that later. Does this really make much of a difference? Probably not. We just made that decision because it seemed to make sense at the time. So let's go ahead and move on here to our next shot. Here is layer number 2. So now we have the 3/4 inch that's sitting left to right from the angle that we're looking at. And you can see all of my corners, I'm just gonna move my device here, sit flush on all 4 sides between the 1/2-inch and the 3/4 inch. And this is the benefit to using a table saw as opposed to a circular saw. Now, if you know what you're doing, a circular saw is going to work just fine. But the nice thing about the table saw is that you get those really, really nice flush cuts where everything sits really nice. So this is layer number 2. And now our next shot is going to be the finishing layer, which goes up on top. This is going to be partially our finished piece of oak, and it will be surrounded by rubber. Okay, this is the center of layer number 3. The front part, the part that's going to be by the squat rack, is my piece of oak. The piece that is closer to us is a piece of 3/4 inch rubber, and you will notice that we cut the 3/4 inch rubber so it is exactly the same width as the piece of oak. And then as far as the length goes, the view that we have from here, the 2 pieces combined make exactly the 94.5 inches. As a matter of fact, they go just a teensy bit over, again, for the reasons we've discussed before. I want that top layer to sit just a tiny, tiny bit bigger so I don't have to see any of that ugly OSB when I'm looking down at my squat rack once the metal pieces are put in. Next shot, we're gonna put in the rubber pieces on the sides. Here's our next shot. We have the, it's approximately 2 foot by 2 foot. These are the square pieces that we cut at the very top. We had to have that little extra space because obviously stall mats only come in 4 by 6 lengths. So I figured before I put down the last couple of stall mats, I will show you this screenshot so you can see that. And now let's go ahead and add the last 2 pieces. And here's our finished product. So between all of our layers, we have approximately the 2 inches of height that we need. So it sits flush to the metal. You'll also notice that it's not drilled in yet, but all of my cuts here are relatively clean. Also, I don't know if the camera is going to catch this or not, but there's just that little tiny bit of hangover over the top edge. So my very, very top piece is like basically the width of my saw blade, bigger than the 2 layers beneath it. And what that allows us to do is hide any little dirty work that's underneath. There are the screw holes for the squat rack have a little bit of margin where when we put the metal brackets around the outside, it's going to ensure that we don't see any of that OSB underneath. Now, you'll notice when you see the screenshots later of the first one that we built for the gym, the first one we had the 4 by 8 sheet run all the way down. We decided that these other 2, we were not going to do that. Now, if you want to do that, you totally can, especially if you're doing Olympic weightlifting. As a matter of fact, you're probably going to want that middle piece of wood to be the entire length of the rack. We actually do not Olympic lift at our gym. We do predominantly powerlifting. And what we discovered was our lifters prefer the rubber bottom. So the way we are set up here, it's going to allow us to have the same feeling that we would have on the competition platform, where the entire thing is rubber. For sumo pullers who tend to split the floor apart when they pull, it's going to give them the necessary grip. We're going to try and circumvent a little bit of that with some of the finishing processes that you'll see on the wood later. But essentially, this is the piece. The one thing that you did not see in this video is us cutting the stall mats. If you were to Google how to cut stall mats, there's some videos out there that will show you how to cut it by hand with a blade. That works. You can totally do that. We made the decision to buy an extra blade, and we actually cut these stall mats very, very carefully on a table saw. I do not recommend doing that, which is the reason why it's not in the video. Trying to cut a stall mat on a table saw is dangerous, and it should not be done. I've been woodworking for many, many decades. I had a helper with me. We were as careful as we possibly could be, but in the end, I just decided that it's better not to show that on the video. I have never seen any footage anywhere else on the internet of people doing this. I'm guessing because of the dangerous nature of it. I'm a bit of a perfectionist, so I wanted these stall mats to be cut as close to being like a factory cut as possible, so I made the decision to use a table saw, but it is not recommended. There are a variety of other ways to do it where I'm sure you can get cleaner cuts than doing it by hand with a razor blade, but that was the decision that we made. So now that we have this all figured out here and sorted out, we are going to now talk about how to finish that piece of oak. Okay, so now we're going to be prepping our top wood piece. So this one is 3/4 inch oak plywood. The one that we have at the gym, I use birch. I made the decision to switch over to oak for these last two. The wood is a little bit harder. I was a little disappointed at how soft the birch was. I thought it would make for a better lifting platform. I think birch is a little bit prettier, but I think for utility purposes, we're gonna be switching to the oak. I may end up redoing the one at the gym. Now, we're gonna prep this surface. I have some 220 grit sandpaper here. Now, I've seen this done different ways. There are some schools of thought that say for a lifting platform that you just leave this absolutely unfinished, just the bare wood, however it comes from Home Depot. It does work. Having the natural wood grain without having any finish on it is gonna give you a little bit less skin. So it'll help you, like with your weightlifting shoes, it'll help you stick to the platform a little bit. The thing that I didn't like about the unfinished is that it gets gross. So our cleaning crew just runs amok really quick, so I wanted to do a polyurethane finish, which is what we're gonna do today. So before we get into it, we're gonna sand our surface, and this is not a major woodworking project. I'm just using a hand sander, 220 grit sandpaper, and I'm just gonna move with the grain as I sand this piece down. I think 220 is probably going to give me the surface that I'm looking for. It's going to take out some of these marks and whatnot and just make it look nice before we start the process of the polyurethane and applying our company decal onto the board. So. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to apply our decal. So I had this made at a local sign shop. It's a pretty simple decal. I don't want to take too much time on this video to discuss how to apply the decal. One thing that we want to be aware of here is if you're going to do it, you have to think about where your squat rack is going to sit. So where my squat rack sits, there's a big piece of metal for the cross member that's going to sit right over here. And so I want to make sure that where I stick my rack, that I'm going to be several inches below it, because I want to be able to see my logo. But I don't want to be way down here because you don't want to disturb like where the lifter plants their feet for a squat. So I'm going to measure probably, I don't know, say about I'm going to probably double the width of my rack here. So I'm probably going to go I'll probably go about 6 inches down. And then there's a little bit of a process. I'm going to tape these sides, tape the middle, get it nice and centered, and then you just apply 1/2 at a time using a little bit of a scraping tool, which I have sitting over here. There's 1,000 videos on YouTube that show how to apply a decal, so I won't spend too much more time on that. I'm going to apply this decal before putting on my poly. I do want to have that little bit of extra protection for the decal, so before we start putting down our layers of poly, we'll get the decal down first. Put our first coat of polyurethane. I am using a water-based polyurethane. There's really nothing super special about it. I went with a semi-gloss. That's really more of a personal preference. I was a little scared to do a full gloss because I was afraid of like that fishbowl effect that it gives to finishes, and the satin I was afraid just was going to be too dull. So I went with a semi-gloss. It looks pretty good on the one that we did at the gym, so I just decided to go ahead and stick with it. This is really a pretty simple process. There's you use like oh, I forgot the name of this material. It's not the pig hair stuff. It's the plasticky stuff that works better for applying polyurethane finishes. It's whatever they tell you to get at Ace Hardware. The thing that's important when you're working with poly is that you do not shake the can. It'll create air bubbles, which will screw up the finish on the wood. So what you do instead when you open it up is you take a stirring stick and you stir it. And when you do that, you just want to be really patient. Make sure it gets stirred in really good. So I'm just going to slowly stir this for a little bit, and I am going to, once that looks like it's just about ready to go, I'm going to apply my first coat of polyurethane. First coat of polyurethane is done, and one of the things that I really like about the polyurethane finish is, I don't know if the camera is picking this up or not, but it brings out all the character in the wood. So if you're a woodworking nerd like I am, like this piece looks completely different now that I've got the polyurethane. I can see all the character of the oak, which is really neat. Also, I didn't mention this before, but I am applying it with the grain, obviously. And my brush, I went with that same pattern over the decal. So when the light hits it right, it actually looks like the decal is kind of part of the wood, because the brush kind of puts that wood grain look into the decal. So coat number one is done. I think I'm going to go ahead and call it a night. We're going to let this cure for 24 hours before putting down the second coat. Basically, I'm going to do that same thing a second time, and then that last third coat is the one where we're going to add our anti-skid material. So I think that's good enough for now. All right, so we're here at day 2. This poly coat has dried real nice. The first coat looks really good. The first coat is really just that initial, you can almost hear the wood sucking the polyurethane down into its surface. So it's still a little rough. I think what I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to get some some finer sandpaper, 400 grit or so, and I'm going to run over this one time with some really fine sandpaper, and then we're going to go ahead and apply coat number 2. Our 2 coats of polyurethane, and we are now ready for our third and final coat of polyurethane. Now, what I'm going to do on this third one is I'm going to mix in an anti-skid, what do they call this? An anti-skid additive. And this is sold where you get the stuff to do the epoxy garage floors. I don't know if the camera's catching it, but I have that floor actually here in my garage. And this, you would dump the entire bag into a gallon of that clear coat that you would use for the garage, but it has back here some instructions on how to use it in smaller batches. Now, I have a quart of polyurethane. I've already used quite a bit of it to do all of my other pieces. It looks here visually like I've got about a half of a quart left. And it says here for 1 quart you would put in a half a cup. So pretty easy to do the math there. I've got myself a 1/4 of a cup measure. I'm going to measure out a 1/4 of a cup of this stuff, and I'm going to dump it in here. And I'm going to stir it really, really good. Now here's the deal. When you're using the anti-skid stuff with the polyurethane, you have to constantly be stirring it because it's basically, it basically looks like glorified silica sand. As a matter of fact, if it was silica sand, I would believe it if they told me that. So I'll have to constantly stir it. It would be helpful to have a second set of hands here. I don't have that today, but you just want to make sure like you put a little bit on, keep stirring it, do a little bit more, keep stirring it. You do not want to let that silica sand or the anti-skid, whatever it's in here, settle down to the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and mix this batch up, and I will be spreading that over the over my board here. Surface is basically ready to go. We got everything sanded, we got some clear coat on there, several coats of that, and then we have a final clear coat that has the anti-skid material on there, and I think it's looking pretty good. So the next thing we're going to do before we head over to the gym and start putting all this together is we are going to pre-drill our holes for the screws that we're going to be putting in to secure this board down to the other 2 layers. So in order to do this, you need a small drill bit. The drill bit basically needs to be a smidge smaller than the screws that you're planning on using. Now the screws that I'm using here are 6 by 1 5/8. The reason for this slightly longer screw is I want to make sure that I go through the wood and catch plenty of the 3/4 inch plywood that's underneath to keep it secured down really nice. So to do that, first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to get my tape measure. I'm going to measure probably about 1.5 inches in on each direction, probably about 1 inch, and I'm going to put 1 in each corner. I'm going to take the halfway point and I'll put another screw at the halfway point, and probably for this one that might be it. So there's going to be a total of 8 screws that are going to hold this one down. I might, on second thought, I might do 2 on each side besides the corners. So just partially it's going to be for aesthetics, even though for the most part you're not going to see it. It's just a little bit of an extra safety measure to make sure that they stay down. So I'm going to use my center punch and my tape measure, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use it's just a spring-loaded center punch. I'm going to pre-mark all of my spots, and then I'm going to drill the hole. And then I'm going to put my countersink bit, and I'm going to put the countersink on there. So the reason for the countersink is so when I put my screw in, it sits nice and flush, and I don't have any screws sticking up or any heads or whatnot. It gives it a nice clean finished look. You want to be careful when you're using a countersink. Don't go too far down in there because that's not going to look good. But yeah, let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to use my center punch and my tape measure. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use it's just a spring-loaded center punch. I'm going to pre-mark all of my spots, and then I'm going to drill the hole, and then I'm going to put my countersink bit, and I'm going to put the countersink on there. So the reason for the countersink is so when I put my screw in, it sits nice and flush, and I don't have any screws sticking up or any heads or whatnot. It gives it a nice clean finished look. So we got all those done. Just want to give you a quick peek here. This is what the finished product looks like when you have your pre-drilled holes and your countersink. I ended up deciding to go a little bit crazy here. I ended up doing one about every 12 inches apart. Is that overkill? Yeah, it's probably overkill, but it's going to make sure that that board stays nice and secured down. I noticed there's a couple of, on the underside here, there's a little bit of pull apart on the plywood underneath. So what I'm gonna do, I'm not gonna put this in the video. I'm just gonna go underneath and sand all that off. I don't want that to be causing the board to sit funky on the other board. So that's the finished product, and we are ready to take this bad boy to the gym. We are now here at the world famous Protocol Strength and Conditioning, where we're gonna be setting up our racks. So the first thing that we're gonna do is I put down the metal brackets and line them up and try to use this space to kind of figure out like where we want the thing to live. I find it easier to use the brackets to do that than the wood. It's just less cumbersome. So now now that we have our bracket set where we like it, now we're gonna start dropping the wood panels. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna get our 1/4 inch wood panels, and we're gonna place those on, those are gonna be placed up and down. So you'll see the cross pattern here in just a moment. Then we're gonna put the 3/4 inch panels on top of that, facing the other direction, side to side, so we can then put our final layer, which is the rubber and the final wood panel, I'm calling it up and down. So I'll do a quick time lapse here so you guys can see what that looks like, and here we go. So here it is assembled. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna add the corner pieces. I think we have it fairly square here, but as I had mentioned earlier in the video, these corner pieces do have a little bit of play, which was a very, very good thing on the manufacturer's part. So if you're off by a 1/16 of an inch or whatever, it's really not a big deal. We're gonna go ahead and put these corners on, and then we will be ready for our next steps. So while Coach Wally is over there finishing up the brackets, I'm going to go ahead and get started here by putting the screws in. And this is how we're going to secure the rack down to the boards that are beneath it. So with everything bolted in, we actually made the decision that we're not going to put screws into the rubber because the frame is so tight to the rubber gaskets. We actually had a challenging time getting it in there. So I'm going to give this thing a quick wipe, and then we are going to get the squat rack put into position. So now our squat rack is in place. We spent a few moments just making sure that we have it exactly where we like it. We laid down on the bench and made sure everything looks straight and everything. And I'm probably more OCD than most of the people watching this video, but this is basically what our final setup looks like. I'm gonna get this bench out of the way so we can see what's going on. Now, the last thing that we're gonna do here before we load this thing up and classes start rolling in is we are going to use the brackets to attach the squat rack down to this plywood base. So in order to do that, we're gonna do a couple of things here. We're gonna first grab the brackets, attach them to the rack itself, and then we're going to pre-drill some pilot holes that are about 3/8 of an inch. We're using a 3/8 of an inch drill bit because I have 1/2 inch bolts. So I want to get a nice pre-drill in there so I don't damage the wood when I'm trying to secure my racks down. And we'll show you guys step by step what that looks like. So we have 2 holes on here, 1 hole on there. We're just going to line this up to the very edge, and then we have some hardware. So we're going to we got the big bolts here. I'm going to put the big washer on first. I'm going to shoot that through. And then I'm going to take my locking washer and my locking nut and put that on the other side. And I'm going to do that on both units. So I'm going to set my adjustable wrench here to hold it in place. Get it finger tight with my socket. And then get my ratchet. And I'm going to go ahead and kill the video. I don't need to bore you guys with this. You just tighten them up. Again, I'm probably more OCD than most people watching this video. I'm going to start with a very small pilot hole that's going to get me dead center right in the middle of that bolt where I want it. Now, before you do this, remember, this is a one shot, one kill. So make sure you absolutely have the rack and everything situated exactly where you like it before you start drilling this hole. So now we're going to drill the first pilot hole, then I'm going to attach the larger bit and drill the second pilot hole, and then I'm going to put my bolts through there. All right, last but not least, I've got my 1/2 inch bolts here, and I got my big washer that I'm going to do with that. And what we're going to do is we're going to stick that through there, and I'm actually going to use my ratchet so I can control how much torque I put on the bolt. Over tightening it here is bad. It's going to strip out the pre-drill, so I don't want to do that. And let's see, this one should be. Did I do it? Nope, still didn't do a good job guessing. This must be a 3/4 inch. Yeah, 3/4 inch. So what we're going to do on this one is I'm going to come over here and give it some pressure downward. And I'm just going to start to let it start to grab the rubber. And then once it's in there, I'm going to give it some downward pressure. And I'm just going to try to get it fairly tight without over-torquing it. Well, here's our finished product. We bought some of that caution tape just as a security measure here, safety measure I should say, keep people from accidentally tripping because there's a little bit of a bump there. But yeah, with all of our pieces in place, this is basically what the finished product looks like. Now on these, you'll notice here we did one other one, and there's actually a third one that we're building right now to go under that last squat rack over there. This one we decided to do an entire 4x8 sheet for the wood, and in hindsight, that might have been a calculated error. Now, if you're Olympic lifting, obviously the wood platform looks and works great. For powerlifting, especially for folks who do sumo and split the floor really hard, this ended up not being the best option. I had to make some modifications here. I may actually end up redoing this middle one to look more like this one where we did the rubber on the backside. So for deadlifting, you're good there. And over here, you've got your wood for the squats and whatnot. And also for obviously for the aesthetic look with the protocol logo and all that stuff that's on there. Really, it's up to you and your needs and your gym, or or what type of lifting you are doing. So that's kind of what's neat about this is I tried to put both options on here. One other quick note, I think I may have mentioned this earlier in a previous shot here, but we ended up switching over to oak wood instead of the birch. The oak is a lot harder, and it does seem to work a little bit better than the birch over here. So if I do end up replacing this sheet, it will not get replaced with another piece of birch. It'll get replaced with another piece of oak. So thank you for watching this video. There's not a lot of how-to on this channel, but if you are looking for coaching instruction, some more information about our gym, you can peruse some of the other videos on our channel. And yeah, thanks for watching. Good luck to you.